Hello everyone, I'm Amaria Scott, and today I will be sharing with all of you guys my recent findings on the African culture. So the first and foremost, I've chosen this culture because I only have a basic knowledge of this culture. I'm not exactly familiarized with it, but I do have a basic knowledge of the African culture. But I was also very curious to learn more about the culture. So first and foremost, the first question is, what did you know about the culture before you began your research? So what I already knew about the African culture was how that there are many different languages that they speak within Africa, within each country within Africa, as well as community and family are very highly valued within Africa and different African cultures. And I am also familiarized with the concept with the different traditions and the art and the music and the clothing that they wear, as well as the marriage customs and how in some parts in Africa you can have multiple brides. So that's all my knowledge of what I already knew about Africa. But the second question is, what did you learn from the two scholarly academic articles that changed or deepened your knowledge? So the two articles that I chose to basically learn and deepen my knowledge about Africa, I chose one of the articles that I've chosen was an article called African Cultures and Literatures, a Miscellany by Collier. It was published in 2013. And what I took away from reading this article is that literature in Africa is actually very, very important, and it was used to preserve history and shape current social and political facts. Another thing that I took away from this article was how African literature was actually deeply tied to the land and tied to oral storytelling and community practices, and how African writers use the oral traditions and written text to address issues of post-colonial identity and national unity, as well as African writers have challenged governments and fought against social injustice by using literature. And then another article that I chose was an article called African Culture by Chambers. It was also published in 2013. And what I learned and took away from this article was that core values define African communities and how African cultures are united rather than being individualistic. I'm sorry, I butchered that word, but how Africa is very relying on communities and families rather than being individualistic like America. And family structures and rituals and leadership are very important factors of the African culture, and how African cultures are very important due to the significance and how it's viewed as sacred, and it plays a very, very important part of spiritual practices and identity and ancestral worship. So in other words, like I was saying before, how it's described within the article, how Africa is very reliant on family structures and rituals and communities rather than being individualistic like America, because America is very individualistic and relies on oneself and very independent. But in Africa, cultures and family values and communities are very, very important. So the next question is, how was your understanding enriched by additional academic sources you read? So by reading both of the articles, I honestly was able to learn a lot more about the African cultures than I actually knew about before. And I gained more knowledge and insight on the culture and history about African cultures and how they go about their lives. And honestly, now that I read more from, what I've pulled from both of these articles, I'm actually a lot more intrigued with African culture. Not that I really was before, but just honestly pulling information from different articles, honestly, pulling information from different articles and sources about the African culture has honestly made me a lot more intrigued with the culture, and has made me honestly, do a lot more research on it by myself, as well as even getting more deep into honestly trying to learn more about my history and my heritage, and trying to connect my heritage with basically trying to connect with the African culture and the heritage, to basically kind of get a feel and a connection with my African roots. But that's all today.